I'm bringing greetings from Maud Barlow. So Maud couldn't make it tonight, and she's very sorry. And we have a couple of things, sort of a couple of treats from her that we'll be talking about in the evening. But she definitely has all of her heart in the fight, and I think many of you know that she's been up to the site several times over the past couple of months, and I think for all of us that work with her on a daily basis, we're constantly hearing when she's not at the site how much she wishes she was. So she's been, over to England to give a speech. She's been sort of up in different parts of Ontario and across the country, and we constantly get this messages going, why am I not at the site? Why am I not sitting with the women? So she does wish she could be here. The couple of things that I want to run through is just that tonight's a real action night. We've got a lot of people. We've got, it's really come down to a crunch time in terms of stopping this dump site from being built. So we have a number of kind of action components, and that requires you to use your hands a little bit, sign some petitions that we have. It requires you to open your hearts and open your wallets a little bit and really help us with this last push. So one of the things I want to point out is you may well, and I hope you've been handed this petition, which we have, several hundred copies of at the back. So if you could sign that petition tonight, and if you could leave it with us, so anyone at the back at the Council of Canadians table, we've sent this out to our membership across the country, and they've been coming back in the thousands. So we just want to do a final push before we do a delivery to Gerritson's office at the Ministry of Environment. So that's the first thing. Second thing, we've given you membership brochures for the Council of Canadians. We'd love it if you're not a member. If you are a member, thank you very much. If you are a member, if you could sign up and join us tonight, we can continue to do this work. We're going to do a Pass the Hat in a little bit, which is going to be these white buckets, which are going to fund directly the protest camp, or the camp that's set up right across from the site. So for those of you that haven't been there, those of you that have been there, you'll know that they need the support and appreciate the support. So if you can drop something into that bucket when it comes by, that would be great. Also, Penny Foster is here. And she's got her hand up in the back with a black shirt and one of the fantastic Stop Dump Site 41 hats on. She's going to take donations that'll go specifically to the legal fund. I think everybody knows there's been just a series of abhorrent protests over the last arrests over the last couple of weeks, and those people really need some legal support. So that's the money stuff. The last thing, and I think a great way that you can really show your support, buying one of the white t-shirts. I think everybody's seen them when you come in, but we have these for $15, and like I said, they also go to supporting the work that's being done. And we're having these, I don't know what they're called, but those things that you put off your antenna on your car or your bike or something. We've got a bunch of those at the back. If people could pick some of those up and show your support when you're driving around town or out and around town, that would be great. But so we'll get started. I wanted to ask Dale Goldhawk to come up on the stage. He's been a real champion getting information out to everyone who listens to the program.
I see an awful lot of familiar faces from the dump site. This, for those of you who are counting, is our fourth rally against Dump Site 41, working towards, we hope, that one-year moratorium when Simcoe County politicians get together on August 25th, if something doesn't happen before that. We always live in hope, don't we? We have a lot of interesting speakers tonight who will really be here to give very interesting aspects to this incredible story. And to me, there really are two Dump Site 41 stories. There's the official one from the county administration, the don't worry, be happy message, the propaganda product, the press release, the easy and quick dismissal of concerns all of you have voiced. And then I think there's the real story. The real story. You have to dig for that one. Maybe use a shovel. And you might need a crowbar in order to get from the county certain information that supposedly proves this is a great spot for a dump site in the first place. Even the privacy commissioners become involved in that battle, and the battle continues. Now the county of Simcoe, and you'll hear more about this from Steve Ogden tonight, is battling the privacy commissioner over releasing the supposed information that proves this is a wonderful place to put garbage on top of all of that pure water, some of which you have tasted perhaps tonight, or maybe tasted before in all of those open spigots around Elmville. There is a lot more. This is a developing story. You've heard about it from me on AM 740 for about 6 months now. And you're going to hear tonight as well from some suspected criminals who thought they were exercising their right to protest a dump site they found to be despicable. The county applied for an injunction, and many of those people, 10 or 11 of them now, have been arrested and charged under the criminal code.
Shame.
2 of the women,
Shame.
absolutely. 2 of the women as well have been named in a civil suit involving some $160,000. We'll hear more about that tonight as well as this continues. So tonight, Dump Site 41, the real story. We're in University of Toronto territory. We are tonight, and so I think it's only appropriate that we hear first off from Sandy Hudson, and she's the University of Toronto Student Union President. Sandy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Hello. My name is Sandy Hudson, and I'm the president of the University of Toronto Students Union, and I'm also the women's representative for the Canadian Federation of Students. And thank you for coming out tonight. The issue of safety and availability of clean water is one that we cannot ignore any longer. As many of you know, the plan to turn Site 41 in tiny township Simcoe County from a source of some of the cleanest water in the entire world into a garbage dump is well underway in spite of massive opposition from environmental groups, labor unions, Indigenous groups, and members of the community. The systematic degradation and destruction of the spaces that sustain us is reflective of the deeper problems that we face in our society. Problems of citizen engagement, of representative and accountable governments, of the unchecked power of corporations, and of a lifestyle that produces the largest amount of waste in human history. This issue affects not just one community in rural Ontario, but each and every one of us. But Site 41 has become more than just another natural space soon to be ruined by waste and so-called development. It became more when the entire community spoke out against it, when the government refused to stop the project, when people were arrested for trying to protect the integrity of their homes, of their fields, and of their water sources, for trying to protect their own health. Site 41 has become a symbol of systematic inequities in our society, and of the place that citizens really hold in the eyes of the government, a place of nuisance, of something to be ignored in favor of large corporations. No longer is it our right to a safe, healthy home, or to express our opinions and opposition to the government. It highlights the total disregard that the Ministry of Environment and Simcoe County have shown for local residents, environmental stewardship, and respect for First Nations and Aboriginal communities. On behalf of the 41,000 undergraduate students at the University of Toronto and the 500,000 students of the Canadian Federation of Students, I would like to say that it's time to put a stop to this. It is time for our voices to be heard and to have an impact. We stand in solidarity with all of those calling for environmental justice. And thank you so much for all the work all of you do.
I'm going to have to shuffle around with our guest list tonight. Some of our guests were late getting out of court. You know how it is, fighting the county and all. One goes to court, apparently. And so they will be here a little later. So forgive me, the speakers. I'm going to shuffle you around a bit, if you don't mind. The first man I'd like to bring up has been battling this dump site for years. years. It's become a large part of his life. He's the man who went to the Privacy Commissioner. Among all the other things that he has done, he went to the Privacy Commissioner and he says, if all this red-hot information that's being held secret is such good news about Dumpsite 41, it should be released to the public. After all, this is a public project. It is being built with, guess what, public money? Let's see the information. That fight continues to this very day, to this very hour, and I think we could use a progress report from Steve Ogden.
Well, I guess I'll just tell you a little bit about freedom of information in Ontario, and in particular in Simcoe County. I don't really think there is any freedom of information in Simcoe County. In fact, as Dale has alluded to, there seems to be a real struggle going on in between the residents of Simcoe County and the government of Simcoe County. So we know that I started this official search for information in September of 2007. And we've been playing quite a game, and we finally got to a point where the Privacy Commissioner agreed that this information should be made available to the county and then to the people. So we're kind of in a bit of a little teeny spot right now where the county doesn't really feel they have the right to ask for it from Ritchie-Nahuis. Because they got some kind of a deal that they don't have to produce it. This has come from Ritchie-Nahuis or Genevar. It's kind of hard to tell because Genevar has purchased Ritchie-Nahuis. So they were supposed to have an answer back to the IPC, Information and Privacy Commissioner, on the 12th. And so they have got their answer back now. And before I tell you what the answer is, I want to tell you that a little earlier in the week, some correspondence has been moving in between the IPC, the Information and Privacy Commissioner, and the firm of Marshall, that Marshall Green represents in Barrie, who represents the county. And the first letter kind of says, you know what, this is a really big decision, to actually go after this information. So we think we need to go and have council come back, and we'll have a vote to decide how they're going to go about asking the contractor they've been paying for all these years for the information. And the fact is, I think it's so important that they really don't have enough time to get it on the agenda for August. So they'd like to have it on for September, so they can decide, let the politicians decide whether or not they should take some kind of action against their contractor, our contractor, to get the information. So that's what they said. And off it went by fax on the 5th. And on the 6th, there's another letter from the IPC, Information and Privacy Commissioner. And it says, this is very interesting. You're telling us you don't have a lot of experience in this and you need more time. And basically, I can shorten this story up. Request denied. This is way too big an issue, which was almost personalizing the letter. I was quite impressed to read that. So that was on the 6th. On the 10th, the firm of, Marshall Green, on behalf of the County of Simcoe, wrote back. And it's a 3-page letter. And it basically says, we've already been told by Ritchie-Nahuis they won't produce it. That's it. That's it. Now it's up to the Information and Privacy Commissioner to decide what they're going to do about getting the county to go get this information. Now, this may sound like a fairy tale in a sense because it can't be real. This is Ontario. But it seems to be that way. So now the test is, does the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario have more power than the mighty county of Simcoe? So the story now gets bigger. I mean, we're all here because we care about our water. And more so, we're here because we care about our kids. That's what we care about. Because we're going to leave this to our kids. We can't get around this. This is not a garbage issue, as the county would have us believe. This is about our children. And if we don't stop this, how do we explain it to our children? And we'll have this, it's just a dump, it's not a big deal, it's over the Allison Aquifer, but it's perfect, it'll never leak. So what part of that do we believe? We know with great certainty that all landfills leak. No matter how modern they are and cutting edge, they leak. That's what they do. And if you have a plan to fix it, and they got a plan, the plan is to buy the land around the site, to make it bigger so that you have a bigger area to dilute the leaching. So it's a plan, and it's acceptable by the Ministry of the Environment's guidelines. I guess we need to change that. If we continue to build dumps and digging holes in the ground, we will never ever achieve zero waste. And there are those cynics that believe that this can't happen. Well, maybe it can't, but I'll bet you we can get really close, because there's all kinds of people in here that already know about zero waste. They used to practice it 60 years ago. That's what they did. You know, like, we didn't have garbage trucks running up and down the road looking to fill in holes. You know, people, organics, well, we didn't even talk about the word organics. It was stuff that went to the chickens or it went to the garden. There was, everything was used. We just have different materials out there now. So now we have to figure out a way to make the producers responsible. This is not really tough. And if we all stand up and say, we're not going to accept it, we want a better way, we can do this. And there's people doing this all over the world right now. It just isn't happening in Ontario. Our minister, Minister Garrison, has said he'd be excited to have this happen. But there's nobody pushing from inside the government. Like, so it's kind of an empty, well, it's empty. It's not real. It's only real if the government actually says, we want some legislation to make it happen. So I'm really looking forward to the government to stand up with us. Because we're already standing up. We're holding hands. We're shoulder to shoulder. The government is sitting down. I'm not going to take shots at the county of Simcoe. It's so disgusting how they are acting and treating us. I believe their fate will be dealt with another day. And we don't have time for that. We do not have time to fight with the county on this. We have to move ahead, and we have to just go right by them. And we have to tell the world that we are ready to take on waste. And we're not going to dig one more hole, because if we dig another hole, then it won't be important. The county has a fact sheet. It's called the fact and myth sheet. I don't know what that means. All I know is we have in Simcoe County, by the county's own records, anywhere from 25 to 40 years capacity with the expected growth. So, is that a lot? Well, I think that's enough time for us to come up with some better ideas. To improve our recycling, our organics, and diversion quite easily at 80%, which could give us another 40 years. I think that's what we have to do, and we have to organize to do that. I know we're organized to fight Site 41. Unfortunately, it tends to break the law, it appears, and we end up in jail. So I don't want to see anybody else in jail. I think we got the country's attention that we're quite serious. Now I want to be able to work with all of those politicians that want to create a better Ontario, and not just tiny township, because this is all about all of us. And somehow or another, we have to do that. And so I'd like to I'd like to have it so we can get rid of the politicians and get some leaders. That's what I'd like to do. Now, I'm not quite sure how to do that, but I think that's achievable. So we have all these things that are achievable right in front of us. The very first thing we have to remember is this is about our children. If we can just get our hands around that and think about that, we'll be very, very effective. And we have to keep smiling. We can't let all this negative things that are happening from the county affect us, because our kids are watching us. They are witnessing our actions. If we fail in this, how could we ever expect them to do better for their kids? We're on a spiral downwards. So we have to reverse that. And we have to rise up. And there's no need for violence. It's just awareness. And I'm sure that the Premier of the province will get the message. I'm sure he's getting the message every day right now. I'm sure the bean counters are out there counting. Okay, if this many people say this, what does that mean on my vote? And all that stuff. But I want them to know that we think they forgot all about Walkerton. We really think that. And we need them to get on board and just put all this behind us. The development of Site 41, as we see it rapidly moving ahead, day by day, and I think Danny Beaton says it best from his way, it's a rape of Mother Earth. I have to tend to agree with him on that. It's just so vile that most of us go home because we know we can't do anything. We think we can't do anything. I don't want to celebrate my silver anniversary of fighting this next year. Like, I would like to say I didn't make it, I didn't get the ring, I didn't get the plaque. I'd like to say in the 24th year, getting close to the end, we were able to convince our politicians that we need a better way, and we should be the standard for all of Ontario. And I know everybody's waiting for this. I just know it. So I don't know how long I was supposed to talk. And as you all might know or don't know, my eye on the left side it's an excellent piece of work. But it was put in me because I put a foreign spike through it a number of years ago. So I can't see anybody over here. So I don't know if I'm getting a finger. And you notice I'm not looking that way. So I'm not sure. I mean, I could talk forever, but I can soon stop. Well, that's okay. I'm kind of said I want to talk, and now I'm speechless. Is there anybody that would have...
I wanted to bring up something you can talk about.
Oh, thank you, Dale.
We were talking about the battle with the Privacy Commissioner and the fact the Privacy Commissioner adjudicator is not letting this battle to go. In the back and forth debate, the county was saying, hey, it's a private company, we can't compel them to release the information, whether it's Jagger Hymns or whether it's Genevar, and the Privacy Commissioner adjudicator wrote back, quoting case law that said the county is responsible in that kind of situation for that information. It's the same as if they were the contractors themselves, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Obviously, Dale has been reading this stuff. I've been reading way too many things. In my struggle to acquire information out of the county, it takes us in many strange ways to places that you wouldn't normally go. Because first of all, you ask for information, which is our right as people from Ontario. And the county has 30 days to respond. That's the max. So if I was to ask for the same information from the Ministry of the Environment, they have 30 days too, but they have a better way of doing it. As soon as you send it, they phone you and they ask you to clarify what you want. Are we clear? So that's what they do. And they send me a receipt for my $5. So we're engaged. And then they get at it. And, it could take 30 days, sometimes 60, because they have to do some fairly heavy-duty research. Never have I appealed to the IPC to get information from an FOI from the Ministry of the Environment. So that's good. Now, County Simcoe. Now it's a different story. So you got 30 days. Now, believe this or not believe it. They'll always have it postmarked, the response. I never know whether they've got it or not. They'll postmark it on the 30th day, and they have one of those machines, a mailing machine, where it punches it. And then they don't mail it. I might get it 5 days, 8 days, 10 days later. I don't know. I have no idea. It's just a game, just to kind of get under your skin. And it always says one thing in the past. Denied. Okay. So now I got to appeal it to the Information Privacy Commission. So that's pretty quick. You send it in, but that costs $25. And I've never had one that they haven't taken on. And then that takes some time. And then we go to mediation. Well, the county doesn't really mediate. So that could be 3, 4, 5 months. And then finally I have to get upset and say, that's enough. So then we go to adjudication. And that has a whole different life. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. In the county's case, we argue back and forth. I hire lawyers. We use case law, as Dale said, to say, well, this is what's happened in the past, and here's where we're going with it. So then, at the very end of the whole thing, if I can say it, it never ends because there's always something they want to hold back. They take and they give it to me. They give it to me every time. The only time I haven't got the information is when I ask my own personal information. Well, they have really picked up. I feel sorry for you to try and get information out of them now because they've got a new style. What they do is they go back, yeah, we'll look at it. We're not going to tell you we're going to give it to you, but it's going to cost you some money for us to look. So I can't remember the number. I don't know if it was $23,080 or $22,080, something like that. That's what they were going to charge me if I chose for them to go ahead and look. I had to send them half of it. They didn't want it all. It's $11,500. So they could look for my personal information at the county. I'm like, I thought we were in this new age of computers, you push a button, everything happens. But apparently at the County of Simcoe, you just can't get it. And I didn't have that. So you can appeal that. So I appealed it. And then we have to talk back and forth. And we got her down to $4,000. $4,000. Okay. So you know what? I didn't follow up because I pretty well know what I've done, what I've said. I was just kind of looking for the stuff that caused them to send me a letter that was less than generous to me. A letter that said, if I didn't, or better be careful. I better be careful what I say because they'll use the full extent of the law to get after me or whoever. And of course I got upset about that, but not too much because I kept smiling. And I wrote a letter and says, hey, why'd you write it? We're not. Well, we just did. Okay, so, but they wouldn't tell me what. So I went through Freedom of Information. That took 8 months. It moved fairly quickly, and I got into adjudication. We had hearings. And at the very end of it, it was said that there was derogatory information received from a county counselor, or a counselor, by the administration that was derogatory. And on that information, Mark Aiken, the CAO of the County of Simcoe, felt it was appropriate that he would direct Marshall Green to write me the letter. And I thought, well, that's interesting. But there's no information. They had no information at all that backed it up. So then I really had to apologize to all of you. I sued you. I sued the County of Simcoe because I thought it was inappropriate that they should have that right to threaten one of the citizens of Simcoe County. Now that took a fair bit of time too, and it upset them a lot. And so we came to an agreement that they wouldn't pay my costs, but they would write me a letter, not of apology. It's just something to straighten it out, just to make it so that maybe they made a mistake, but not really. It was called a clarification letter. Clarification. Okay. So they wrote that all up in the October of last, whatever year. The year's blending now for me. And then I said, okay, I don't get any money for all the money I spent, the lawyer, the studio. And they said, well, you can do it, but we're going to go back to court. And my lawyer said, that's about 25 grand. I said, well, I don't need that. I'm not going to do that. And I don't want the ratepayers of Simcoe County wasting any more money. So I said, okay, we're going to do this. Let's sign off. I just want to put in the CMC agenda, Community Monitoring Committee agenda, where the original letter was. Nope, they weren't going to do that. No way. It took me another 6 months. So the letter I got was dated October, but I got it in February. And so they agreed that they would do it, but only on the condition that they put all the terms of the settlement. And well, what's the big deal? Like, someone put the terms in, I guess they figured I'd be shy. Where would they ever get the impression I was shy from? I don't know. So anyways, we got the letter, and there it is, and it says in the letter, I said nothing, I did nothing to cause them to write me this letter. Now, I got a feeling that they probably, like Mark Aiken, probably didn't go to the council to get a vote whether he could threaten me or not. Like, I don't know. I doubt it, though, very much. But now they want to go to the council so they can ask the council, can we go after those people that we paid off these millions of dollars to get the information that we based the entire decision of Site 41 on? This information verifies this site will not leak. And it's so good, the ministry passed it without seeing it. The Ministry of the Environment has never seen the calibrations. That's why we wanted it. So they spent $127,000 to attend a function from the Ministry of the Environment to prove that it was so good and we should be confident. Well, we came out of that meeting and our chair, Ray Miller, said, hey, we have a higher level of confidence in the work you've done. However, the site is a downward gradient site now. And for those of you who wonder about this upward and downward information, it has to have, Site 41, the water must always be touching the bottom of the cell with the pressure to keep the leachate from leaking out. It's as simple as I can say it. Well, during the summer months at Site 41, there was a downward gradient in the upper aquitard underneath this liner. And so it's dry there. There's no water. So there's no water. It's pretty hard to have an inward pressure. And so I went to my expert, because I'm not an expert. They certainly tell me I'm not an expert. So I went to the expert, the top expert in all of the world. I went to Mother Nature, and I said, Mother Nature, why is it the roots of all these plants are going down deeper than the bottom of the cell? Why is it that's where they're going, that's where they're fingering out to pick up water? And Mother Nature yelled back, Because we had to find water to live. So I don't think Mother Nature lies. It just doesn't. It's just a natural thing. So when I was on the site, I dug and I found roots a meter below the bottom of the cells. So that's where the water is during the summer and fall months. There is no upward gradients at Site 41 consistent. It's not being realized. That's a violation of the certificate of approval. The ministry... The Ministry of the Environment has a different interpretation. They believe as long as there's pressure from the lower aquifers underneath in the confined aquifer, there's pressure there, that's good enough. Well, it doesn't say in the certificate of approval that it's just the lower aquifer. It just said there must be all the time. And so they're trying to ignore it. And we're trying to get that answer. So when you hear the county and the ministry say, the CMC is happy? No, we're not happy. We're not happy. There's no upper gradients. Let's see that model and see how you figured this out. Well, of course, they won't give it to us. And it's my best hunch that that model may be deep. Well, I think I heard a quote on Dale's show one day. Decisions made deep in the bowels of the ministry. Well, I think the model is deep in the bowels of Jagerham's office at which he is sold. And so it's deep somewhere else. Will we get it? I don't know. It's possible. Do we need to get it? Not really, because the roots don't lie. The upward gradients aren't there. They're afraid to show us the work. This site is a red herring. It was picked. It was picked and endorsed by the Ministry of the Environment in 1984. They said they would accept a site at the bottom end of Tiny Township. I have the documents. As soon as they said that, they picked Site 41. And ever since then, they've been trying to figure out a way to make it suitable. And I think the best information I can give you is, I think the county puts out this thing where we're failing in our communications. We're not communicating good enough to tell you how good it is. So we're spending, well, $200,000 this week, and they make songs, and even some of the mayors say it. You just don't understand. We have to educate you better. Well, I'm afraid we're past that. That ship has sailed. It doesn't matter how much money of ours they spend to convince us it's safe. It's not safe. It just isn't safe.
Thank you, Steve, for condensing 25 years into a relatively short summary. The drama continues, doesn't it? Okay. Next, I'd like to introduce to you the MPP for Hamilton East and the leader of the New Democratic Party in Ontario, Andrea Horvath.
Thanks, Dale. I'll cut my 40-page speech to about 10. Just kidding. I have to say it's really difficult to come to the microphone after the passion and the eloquence of Steve Ogden, and I think we all owe him a great debt of gratitude. I do have to say that one of the things that he said really struck a chord with me, and that is, he said, we need leaders, not politicians. And I'm proud to be the leader, the new leader of Ontario's New Democrats, and stand here with you in this fight. As long as we have a hope, we're going to stop this from going forward. So thank you for inviting me. I'm absolutely honored to be here with you once again, shoulder to shoulder, to fight dumpsite 41. And to emphatically state with every single one of you in this room and so many other thousands and thousands of people, that our water cannot and should not ever be taken for granted. Dale introduced me as the MPP for Hamilton East. It's actually Hamilton Centre. My riding boundaries changed a little bit, but I do come from Hamilton.
Oh my God, sorry.
And that's okay, no problem. But I do come from Hamilton. And Hamilton Harbour. I saw you, Ms. Pagnini, I saw you. My typing teacher from grade 10. In the back of the room. Us Hamiltonians, we know how to fight. We know how to fight on environmental issues. It's good to see you here. But the bottom line is we fought for many years in my community to clean up Hamilton Harbour. And although it is not a clean harbour yet, that struggle has paid dividends. And we have brought people back to the waterfront in my community. And we have got an amazing amount of awareness now in Hamilton around the importance of protecting water and making sure that people have access to safe and clean water. But for far too long, and we all know this, public water, air, and land have been treated as limitless resources to be exploited and as a dumping ground for waste and for pollution. Absolutely. It's shameful. But thanks to hardworking people like you, we are now much, much more aware of health and environmental dangers of pollution. And people are mobilizing across Ontario to protect our land and our water from things like sewage sludge, urban sprawl, and air pollution. The proposed dump site at Site 41 is a sorry example of the old style of the Boys Club approach to environmental decision making. That old Boys style approach for far too long has been the way that these kinds of decisions have been made in your communities and in mine. Politician after politician, groups of politicians overruling environmental boards, municipal councils refusing to release studies and information, as we once again heard from Steve, and leaders, or I guess I should say politicians, right? Refusing to listen to community members and to First Nations people. And when community members stand up to bad decisions and are forced to take tough action to protect their water, what happens to them? They get arrested. It is shameful. You know, absolutely. My blood boiled, and I'm sure your blood boiled as well, when I heard about the criminal charges laid against Dumpsite 41 activists. It is deeply troubling, to say the least. And to hear Steve's stories about the amount of money that it's costing to try to fight this dump. I can tell you one of the things we're trying to do in the province of Ontario, New Democrats are trying to do, is bring anti-SLAPP legislation to this province, so that people have a chance of fighting. So that regular people like yourselves have a chance at fighting these kinds of developments. There seems to be a pattern emerging, however, where people standing up in Ontario for their rights and a cleaner environment are thrown in jail. Seen it recently. In your situation, we saw it last year with the jailing of leaders and activists from Ritchie-Nahuis. I said it 10 times in the car and I got it right. Ritchie-Nahuis, Innuit First Nations, KI, and Ardagh First Nation, when they were doing the same thing, when they were fighting for their rights and standing up for their land. And that incident cast a dark, dark cloud on the province of Ontario. And it makes me wonder whether all the talk by the McGuinty government on environmental issues is really just a bunch of greenwash. The fact is, absolutely, the fact is that charging well-respected community members is a short-term reaction. And it isn't going to help us to bring long-term solutions to the situation at Dumpsite 41. So I'm hopeful. I'm very, very hopeful, like Steve is and like all of us in this room are, that the push for a moratorium is gaining steam, and I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that all of the organizing that you are doing is paying off. And we know that it is. Councils at Tiny Township, Midland, Springwater, and Barrie are coming on side with their support. So congratulations for that. That is a victory. We're seeing a one-year moratorium on the building of the dump would diffuse a very, very tense situation and stop the needless and unproductive arrests of protesters that are blocking the site. A moratorium, of course, would also provide time to properly assess groundwater conditions, as described again by Steve, and explore all potential alternatives to the dump, including better diversion of waste in the first place and the ongoing imperative to reduce consumption and packaging and get to that zero waste goal. I'm here tonight to commit to you that I will do every single thing that I can in my power to stop the McGuinty government from allowing this dump to go forward. When the legislature... resumes in a couple of weeks, I will be there to pressure the McGuinty government and to press them to implement a moratorium. But when the Premier finally sees the writing on the wall and says no to dumpsite 41 in Simcoe County, it will be because of people like you, because of people like Keith and Ina Wood and Barb Hunt and the other women and men and children and seniors who made such a damn nuisance of themselves. Good for you! That the Liberals will finally throw up their arms and say it's just not worth it anymore. Let's stop this dump from happening. So keep up the fight. We are going to win it, as Steve says. I have no doubt in my mind. Thank you so much for having me here. I will do everything I can to work with you to make sure that the right thing happens in Tiny Township. Thank you.
Is everybody then prepared to be a nuisance? I don't think I heard you. Maybe a bit annoying when necessary? Let's hear now from the Georgian Baykeeper for Georgian Bay Forever, Mary Moody. Mary, come on.
My slides up, I'll just tell you, Georgian Bay Forever is a registered Canadian charity. We undertake research and education projects on Georgian Bay's environment with a focus on aquatic ecosystems. We are members of the Waterkeeper Alliance, the organization started in the United States by Robert F. Kennedy. I can tell you that if Bobby Kennedy was here, he would be saying, is Simcoe County crazy? Have they not learned a lesson from Walkerton? Okay, so how do I do that? Just here. Okay. I live in Toronto about 6 or 7 months of the year. The rest of the time I live up on the bay. I just want those of you who live in Toronto to realize where this site is, how close it is to Toronto, and how connected it is to Toronto. So this is a map here. You can see Site 41 is down at the center at the bottom here. Up at the very top you can see Midland. Site 41 is an hour-and-a-half's drive max from Toronto. That's how close it is to Toronto. You can see Highway 12 over here to the right, goes over to the right to Aurelia, and just south of that is Barrie. The other thing I want you to note here is all of the green area. Mostly where those areas are, there are small rivers, streams that connect into the Wye River that discharges into Georgian Bay. Site 41 actually has a small creek right on the property that leads into McDonald Creek and into the Wye River into Georgian Bay. So just those of you from Toronto, I just want you to get orientated with where this is. But Site 41 is set up with a 1950s mindset. The liner, as you heard, only has a 2-year warranty on the seams. In other words, the only question is how soon, how much, and what toxic mix of leachate will leach out. It also, as a ground landfill, will methane gas will escape from this landfill site. Simcoe County does not capture compostables yet. The gas will be discharged into the air. And also from this site, just under 100 cubic meters a day of leachate sludge will be produced. And notice that I said cubic meters. This is not measured in liters. It's measured in volume. So this is thick, heavy sludge that would be put into tanker trucks and hauled off to local sewage treatment plants. As you've already heard, they supposedly say that there's a positive groundwater discharge into the site, but right now it's being drawn down in order for them to be able to excavate the site. But as that groundwater gets lowered, what's going to happen to the water supply for the local community, including farmers? Will they be left with no water? Nobody has any answers for that question. The leachate sludge, for those of you who don't know, our garbage has some pretty toxic stuff in it. And what you take to a landfill site in Ontario right now, there are very, very few restrictions on it. We know that batteries will leak heavy metals. Pharmaceuticals will leach out, including antibiotics and birth control hormones. Bacteria obviously will be created within the landfill site, and antibiotic-resistant diseases will develop because of the presence of antibiotics. There will be aquatic life disruption once the leachate gets out into surrounding water bodies. We know that male frogs and fish develop female reproductive organs under exposure to birth control hormones. Plus, there will be discharge of high levels of nutrients, phosphates, and nitrates. Where will this contaminated leachate go? That's the really big question here. The discharge standards for Lake Simcoe are much higher than they are for Georgian Bay, so it cannot go to Lake Simcoe. Midland Sewage Treatment Plant has wisely turned away Simcoe County's request, but the latest news is that the town of Blue Mountain wants to take it. I actually have a letter explaining they're already taking some of Simcoe County's leachate and they're prepared to take more. Our current sewage treatment technology does not provide for the removal of pharmaceuticals. I just want to mention this because I think this is important that people know this. Why are they getting this site up and developed right now? Simcoe County has existing landfill capacity out until 2027. That includes the available and remediated sites. It does not include Site 41. Once Site 41 is developed, it will become the largest landfill site in Ontario. A huge amount of land there that is not part of the existing development. So the elephant in all of this is, who are the silent partners? Who is going to pay Simcoe County to be able to discharge, to ship their garbage to this site? Why is Simcoe County going ahead with Site 41? Their permit right now says that they can only ship garbage from within Simcoe County. But we all know that those permits can be changed very quickly. So does all of this make sense in 2009? Do we really like this kind of picture we've got developing across the province? This is basically an example of what could spread throughout Ontario. We need a new approach. Do we really want to accelerate ecological harm to our precious water supplies? We need a long-term sustainable plan that includes zero waste. And I think that zero waste, Simcoe is doing a great job of educating people on the options here for aggressive, what I call the 3 R's: reuse, recycle, and compost. And we've just basically reduced the amount of waste that we produce. But it has to be citizen-based with support from our governments. And I think that this county's citizens have demonstrated that they've got the ability to do that. Democracy doesn't work unless people get involved. And Simcoe County residents are doing a great job of getting involved. If we implement even modest zero waste by 2015, that's an 80% diversion rate, the current landfill sites in Simcoe County could last until 2040. But if we implement serious zero waste by 2015, the landfill sites could go out to 2060. So my message to Premier McGuinty is Simcoe County does not need Site 41. Shut it down now. And as Steve said, generations to come will thank him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. I noticed some people came in the room, including some people fresh from the justice system. One of those people is Vicky Monet of the Anishinaabe-Quay. I just want to say one thing. Vicky still proudly holds the record of having her postal address changed to dumpsite 41. She wears that very proudly.
You know, that's a funny thing that when the injunction was placed on me, that's what it said on there, was my address was dumpsite. No, it was actually stated North Simcoe landfill site number 41. And then they put the injunction on me, and I'm like, what are they doing? They're taking me away from my home. I've been living there for 3 months. Give me a break. So it's really kind of funny. Yes, they have put an injunction on me and a lawsuit for $350,000. Shame. They've also charged me with mischief and intimidation, and I think right now they're probably going to go with contempt of court charges as well. So, yes, I am fresh from the justice system. Just came straight from court, and I tried to get down here as soon as I could. But I'm gonna tell you a little bit of a story. In April, I had just finished a contract with Wosley First Nation. I was an IT information technologist for the local school. Single mother of 3. I was kind of doing school and work at the same time and had a lot of things going on. Didn't really give too much attention to issues larger than my life, or issues larger than what my life was at the time. Until the May 4th Council of Canadians Walk for Water in Elmville. That walk was 6.5 kilometers from Elmville, Ontario to the landfill. And when we got there, I saw Steve Ogden. Where did he go? Anyways, I'd never met him before, and he kind of took me on as a little bit of a protege. I say I'm his Padawan learner, and he's the Jedi Master, pretty much at Site 41. He's also been named Steve Ogden, PhD, Dumpsite 41, as well as the rebel leader of the
peace-loving leader of the
leader of the rebel forces, which is amazing. So back to what I was talking about was we didn't really think too much that Site 41 would really impact anybody else but the residents of Tiny Township. We knew that on Wosley First Nation, which is my First Nation that I come from, that our recycling was going to Tiny Township, that it was being processed there. We didn't even exactly know what was going on with it. So after we did that walk, we started to realize, wow, there's clean water underneath Site 41 that we all rely on. As a part of me being an Anishinaabe woman, it's my duty to protect that water, and that is something that has been integrated into my life since I was a child. That we pray for those ceremonies, or we do those ceremonies, and we pray for the spirits of that water, so that that water will be there for those generations to come. So we decided on a Thursday afternoon that, you know what, we're going to go out there and we're going to go protest for the weekend. We're going to send out a media advisory. None of us had done press releases in our life, but we wrote up a press release and said, well, we're going out there, we're going to go protest. It's the Native women, we're protecting the water. And we were only going out there for the weekend. And by the end of that weekend, we were like, no, that didn't really do much. Didn't really get the effect that we wanted. So we decided we were going to stay permanently. And it's now been 97 days. They pump water out of the aquifer 810,000 liters a day, and then Mother Earth brings it all right back to us in great big huge storms. So, and those storms have had the power to knock down all our structures. I'm going to talk about one particular structure that we built. We built a sacred lodge to keep the sacred fire going. And Steve Ogden, usually when you're building a lodge, you use all traditional things, natural things. You don't use things that are processed. You don't use metals or any of that. We use tarps, though. That's the one exception. But we actually built that in collaboration with the local community members and farmers, and that's the first time that, to my knowledge, that has ever been done. And Steve Ogden had actually brought his backhoe to dig the holes where the posts actually went in. So it's about 75 feet long and it's about 30 feet wide. So it's really, and it's the strongest structure at Site 41 right now, and it protects that sacred fire. So it's really cool. And being up here, I have to really thank the residents of Tiny Township, Tay Township, Midland and Penetanguishene, who have graciously supported the protest camp being there. If it wasn't for them, that protest camp probably wouldn't have lasted as long as it did. But we don't see it now as a First Nations women's protest camp. We see it as a unity camp. The blockade was also a unity blockade, and it was an amazing event that generated the national media finally on Site 41. So it was really awesome. And then what you'd actually see if you'd have come to the blockade when it was in progress, and I think Mark had some pictures up here earlier, was it was a sharing session in the mornings where people would sit around and they'd drink coffee and talk and liaise, and we were taking things from each other's cultures, which was amazing. And this is the first time in this area that non-Native people and Native people have come together for Mother Earth and to protect them. We like to think that Site 41 is going to go down in history. We've made some amazing accomplishments. We've got the Chiefs of Ontario behind us, Beausoleil First Nation, the National Women's Association of Canada, Angus Toulouse, who is the Regional Ontario Chief for Chiefs of Ontario. Oh God, the list goes on and on. But we continue to look for those ways to stop Site 41. We did, at first when we went out there, we figured the protest camp would generate enough interest. However, we weren't getting maybe it's just me not being satisfied all the time, I don't know. But we started to look for those other ways to start putting more pressure on those politicians to stop Site 41. Specifically Dalton McGuinty and John Gerritsen and Tony Georges. Or Gurgis, apparently. So some people at the blockade have actually called him Tony Gorgeous. So what we actually did was we launched a letter campaign, and I think altogether we've sent out 1,000 letters to Stephen Harper, John Gerritsen, and Dalton McGuinty to stop Site 41. We also worked with Bruce Stanton in doing a petition for a 13-month environmental review regarding Site 41. We also got Beausoleil First Nation on to formally support Garfield Dunlop's private members bill. As well, more recently, within the past 2 days, they are supporting the Council of Canadians in their one-year moratorium for Site 41. Awesome, because we've been out there so long and trying to figure out how we're going to do this the only way that we see, well, personally, that I see, that we are going to win Site 41 right now is everybody doing their part. Everybody's got to step up to the plate and do something. All these organizations and everybody have to do something to stop Site 41. We are really fighting an atrocity here, and these people, even in court today, they do not want to change their mind on Site 41. So it has to go to those higher levels. We have one of the awesome things that have come out of this protest and this blockade is the fact that we have probably 200 people per day whose lives are fully integrated in stopping Site 41. That's all they do all day long. That's what they think about. That's what they dream about. They wake up and that's what they do. So the more people who get up and do that, the more power it gives to this effort to stop Site 41. And I honor all of those people, especially Ina and Keith here, who are awesome and amazing. On me, I was really kind of sad, and I was thinking, I'm going to be defiant. I'm going to go sit at a gate anyways. However, because I have children, I wasn't able to do that. But one of the things I missed about Ina was seeing her walking around with the hand drum and singing in those first couple of days that she was there, and it was incredible to see her charisma and her spirit and her passion in stopping Site 41, and how much she's welcomed us into their community. So it was really an amazing feeling. So now we have 10 people who have been arrested, and we had more than that who actually thought they were going to be arrested. One of the best things that the County of Simcoe has done is put an injunction on us, because now we're in court and we're able to show everything that is deficient about Site 41. So it was actually a really awesome process, even though I might have to pay $350,000, but who cares about that? When they arrested Ina and Keith as well, it was a media blitz, and it gave us the coverage and everything that we needed to further put pressure to stop this. And it was a bad move on the OPP to do that, but we did get we got the media out of it. So this is some of the things that we've been doing to try and stop Site 41. And one of the things I said last week when I had to turn myself into the OPP in Midland was that you can put an injunction on me, you can charge me with mischief and intimidation, but you ain't going to stop me from fighting Site 41. And the injunction actually says that I'm allowed to go out and do rallies and speak, so that was really good. But I want to thank you all once again for having me over here, and thank you for listening to me, and thank you for your continued support in stopping Site 41. We will not back down from this. We have absolutely no choice but to stop Site 41 at this point, and we will not let garbage go into Site 41. Thank you.
On other issues, and he said to me quietly, I don't want to talk about dumpsite 41. And I said, why, is it a big issue in your area? A long way from dumpsite 41. He said, I was going door to door on totally different issues, and everybody wanted me to talk about dumpsite 41. A lot of people have been talking about dumpsite 41 for quite some time. One of those people is Garfield Dunlop, the Progressive Conservative member of Simcoe North. Garfield is here. Come on up. That's right. I'm not going to talk about you. You come up and do that yourself.
Thank you very much, Dan. When I came here tonight, I wore this, I probably looked like an NDP'er tonight. And then when Andrea convinced me, look like a conservative. You know, the speakers have been phenomenal, and you know, ladies and gentlemen, it's so great to see this kind of support here. I don't know how many press conferences and media events we've tried to hold just 150 yards away at Queen's Park. We could never get anyone excited about this. They said it's a local issue, go away for it, you know. And Steve, you know, Steve will vouch for me. He was at every one of those. So it's so nice to see the kind of support we've seen from Mickey and your team, the Federation of Agriculture. Just our whole community has come together on this, and it's just a great feeling. I want to say, you know, right off the bat, when I heard Ina Wood being interviewed on we call it the dock at home. The dock? Yeah, the dock radio station. And you know, here's what she said. I'm going to quote you. I just listened to this interview so carefully. She said, you know, when they said, well, what happened? How'd you get charged? She says, well, you know, I was baking tarts. And the old PP called me, and they said, you got to come down here and be charged. And she says, you know, I never told anybody they couldn't go into that landfill. And Keith, you know, when our daughter got married a few years ago, you know, Keith Wood, he took my daughter to the church in his Leatherdale carriage, pulled by a horse in Coldwater, Ontario. And that's the kind of people that are standing up for And you know, I guess where we're really coming here is that the tragedy in Walkerton, where 7 people lost their lives, has cost not only the taxpayers of Ontario and Canada a lot of money. You know, we thought we were changing the way everyone looked at water quality, water source protection, all the nutrient management, and the Ontario Clean Water Act. And obviously, there's been not that kind of attention paid to Site 41. You know, the government, and this is where I get into this, and I'm going to be brief because there are many people who will speak yet, and I've taught the ones that have speaking. But the government did bring in, because of all the controversy around the Adams Mine at Kirkland Lake, the government brought in legislation called the Adams Mine Lake Act. They brought that legislation in and killed all approvals on the Adams Mine application. And so garbage will never be dumped in the Adams Mine at Kirkland Lake. I just want to say, you know, that's where I come into the picture. Immediately after that, and I introduced a bill called Site 41 of the Township of Tiny Act. It is a private member's bill. We will be proceeding with it this fall. I hope we can get a huge, you know, if they haven't stopped it by then, we hope we can get a lot of people out to support that. I have had a lot of success with private members' bills and resolutions in the past, like things like the ignition interlock, blood sampling bills, literacy resolutions, and they've gone over very, very well. So I'm hoping to get a lot of support on this particular bill. And it exactly parallels what happened in the Adams Mine legislation, which would mean that the bill, with all approvals on the bill, including the water taking permits, would come to an end. That's my goal right now, is to try to promote that and to move it forward this fall. So you know, I know there's a lot of. I also want to say while I'm here, I want to thank all the county councillors, because I think a lot of the county councillors have been branded very, very negatively because of the actions of a few. And I know many of the county councillors are absolutely opposed to this, and there's going to be one, I would say, major fight at county council next week, and I think that fight will be led by George Lawrence, the deputy mayor of the township of Tiny. Yeah, and in closing, ladies and gentlemen, we knew nothing about it. You know, I said, well, who's running the show at the county of Simcoe? Because I said, you know what? When you have a municipal body, and you're the leaders of your community, and you have anything to do with personnel, with legal, with land acquisition, or with taking legal action against someone, you go into committee of the whole and you discuss that like a true council. And that didn't happen on this legal action that was taken against Vicki and Megan. So thank you very much, everyone. I really thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. It's great to see all the support against this mistake. Thank you very much.
Okay, now let's have a few words from the Federation of Tiny Township Shorelines Associations. Let's hear from David Liddell.
I'm representing the Shoreline group of people in Tiny Township. We have been aware of dumpsite 41 for many years, of course. It's only been in the last 3 or 4 rallies now that we've become more and more involved. I personally was at the previous 3 ones involved. FLOTSA represents over 2,000 households along the shoreline. And we're concerned about the responsibility that is being taken, and we're concerned, as has been the trend of some of the earlier speakers, about leadership. And I should say lack of leadership on the part of some very key players in our province and in our county. I have been a resident of Tiny Township seasonally since I'm 9 months old, and so I've been around a little bit. I've driven up and down County Road 6. I've seen the dumpsite 41 signs, and I have to admit to you now that I'm a newcomer in this fight. But I can say that I'm here to stay, and so is FOTSA. When I heard Sandy Hudson talk about accountable government, who is the head of the student body here at U of T, for any latecomers, how good that made me feel to know that this whole new generation of people get it, you know, and that they're going to be involved in it. That's music to our ears. Why am I here now?
The water.
I'm here because of water. I'm here because of Georgian Bay, and I'm here because of my responsibility. I have 4 grandchildren who I left over there on the bay at the foot of the 9th concession on the way. I have 3 others that didn't happen to be there today. My parents gave me an education. They taught me the difference between right and wrong. They introduced me to Georgian Bay and to Tiny Township. And you know what? There's a whole lot of right and wrong going on here. The citizens of Simcoe County and of Ontario get it right, and the people that are running Simcoe County and some of the people in the MOE and other places aren't getting it right, and that's a problem. So like Steve said, I have a responsibility to my children, I have a responsibility to my grandchildren and their children and their children. And where does it start? It starts here today. You know, dumpsite 41, as Sandy also said, is a symbol. You know, it's like from this day forth, you know, things are going to change. Politicians and bureaucrats and supposed leaders need to get the message, finally, that we're not going to tolerate this kind of stuff anymore. It's over. So if it's zero waste, whatever it is, we'll find the solutions. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is the people that we have elected at the County of Simcoe and the people that we have elected in the province of Ontario aren't doing the job. And it's just about that simple. Simcoe County is trying to jam down our throats old thinking. And it's really not a good idea. And to stick garbage into the ground, especially on top of an aquifer, is just absolutely incredible. So we're looking for some enlightened ways of dealing with garbage, and there are all kinds of them. And as Mary pointed out, we have lots of time to find the solutions, and the new elected officials of Simcoe County And some of the new bureaucrats around Simcoe County in the next few years will probably help find those solutions. The other group that really isn't doing their job happens to be, at this point in time, I'm sad to say, as we all know, the Ministry of the Environment. The Ministry of the Environment is charged to help protect us, our children, our environment, our water, and the air we breathe. Unfortunately, they seem to have abdicated their responsibility. And they really aren't doing their job. Oh, they're telling us they're doing the job. They send out little flyers and brochures saying, oh, we're doing the job. But they really aren't doing the job. So there's an awful lot of propaganda going on. So how do we know this? Well, Simcoe County won't release the facts. And if the facts are so safe and everything's so wonderful, why won't they? It's just about that simple. MOE issued a certificate of approval for this dump site without ever seeing the science. You know, if this had happened in private industry, could you imagine what would have happened? You know, certainly there would have been all kinds of people that would have been fired by now, for sure. And the other thing, which just sort of hit me in saying, who would have been out there waving their finger accusing the private industry of causing trouble in our environment? Who would it have been? The Ministry of the Environment. They would have sent people in their spacesuits and everything else to show what the problems were. And meanwhile, you know, they're part of the problem that we're having right now. So here we go. So what are the results? Well, they're not being honest. And when they're not being honest and they're not doing their jobs, then the citizens start to take over. The citizens start to get involved. Who's that? Well, we're talking about the agricultural community, the townspeople. We're talking about First Nations people. And now the shoreline residents have jumped in, and we're trying to help too. These are the people, these are the groups that are getting involved. The farmers have been taking responsibility for years. Two of them, Keith and Ina, who've already been mentioned, you all know, were among the first to be arrested. But you know what? Why were they arrested? Because they stood up and they took responsibility. And that is their responsibility. And that's the kind of courage that it takes to be a great Canadian. You know, we're pretty good at waving our finger around the world at other countries here and there and saying how good we are. But you know what? Right in our own backyard, we've got some people standing up and being courageous. They had to do that because Simcoe County and the Ministry of the Environment and the province of Ontario have abdicated their responsibility. So let's be clear about something. When people like Ina and Keith and Ann Naos and Vicky Monet start getting arrested for saving our water, these are symptoms. Okay? These are symptoms. And they're symptoms of poor leadership, and they're symptoms of the lack of responsibility on the part of our elected officials. And quite frankly, some of our bureaucrats. So I'm talking again about the Simcoe County, and I'm talking about the province of Ontario. So I'd like to say that one more time. People getting arrested for taking responsibility, who get forced into that, are symptoms of the lack of responsibility of the officials of the government of Ontario. And it's high time they stood up and got the job done. We all know because you're here and because more and more and more people are coming, that we're all standing up more and more people will come and join us to take responsibility, and we will continue to take responsibility until this fight is won. And I will guarantee you that the people along the shoreline will continue to fight and escalate our struggle with everybody else, these other communities, to win this, because we don't want this environmental disaster, along with other ones, to happen. So we're with you. Let's go forward, and anything we can do to help, we will. Thank you all for doing everything you've done for so many years.
I must say that our next speaker, despite the fact that she was voted Citizen of the Year in her own community in 2004, recently, for the cause, spent a night in jail.
Shame.
Now involved in the same lawsuit that Vicki Vinay is, and charged as well with mischief, an offense under the criminal code. Here comes that criminal right now, and Ritchie-Nahuis.
No handcuffs today, just blue ribbons. I'd like to tell you there's one good thing about going to jail. When I got home, I had cookies and muffins from Keith and Ina Wood on my doorstep. My name is Ritchie-Nahuis. My husband and 3 sons work the land on a farm in Allenville, just north of Allenville, and right beside the tiny marsh, which is a huge provincially significant wetland. I didn't get involved with Site 41 until 2003, and that was when they became forward with the design and operations to develop the site. At that time, in the report, the first report I read, it stated that they expected a better water quality in our area from the landfill because it would be taking it out of agricultural practices. Since that time, we have found that we have the cleanest water ever identified and scientifically peer-reviewed in the whole world. It's just remarkable. We believe the Corporation of Simcoe County's plans to dewater and lower the water table in our area, to put a thin plastic liner to keep the water out of the garbage, is ill-conceived. And the fact that the engineer has stated there needs to be a large quantity of garbage put into Site 41 to hold that lining system down to prevent a blowout sent alarm bells off for me in 2003. So, and I'd just like to tell you a little bit about the farmland. I know the farmland in our area, we are so blessed. We have Class 1 and 2 farmland with a high water table, which even in dry summer conditions, our crops are able to leach into that groundwater system. We've never had a drought. We never have a need for irrigation. So these plans, to me, and to the dairy farmers and other commodity groups in the area, are just unreasonable. And I just want to let you know I appreciate everybody supporting us in this, because we are a real community. And we need the support of down here to make our voices heard. Thank you very much.
Council of Canadians would like me to remind you as well, if you would like to contribute to the support of the camp, the legal fund as well, to help defend those who have been charged. There are buckets out in the hallway. You can do that on your way out, and certainly that would be well appreciated. Our next speaker knows Toronto pretty well. He was its former mayor. is also a former federal cabinet minister, David Crombie.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm at this rally again, as I have been at previous rallies, because I want to add my voice to what is not only being said tonight, but being increasingly said in parts other than Simcoe County around the province. There is a reason, perhaps 2 or 3 reasons, why the demand for a moratorium and a review, I think, is going to increasingly get to the right ears. I hope Garfield's right, and his colleagues at Queen's Park will listen, because the cause is indeed just. And when people ask me, Crombie, why are you involved with this other than the fact that you also live in Tiny Township? I'd say that there's 3 reasons, and I offer them to you. Because when you're talking to people who are not yet coming to our rallies, people who are not yet involved with the issue, but who are coming on with us, I say, look, there's 3 things to keep in mind about this project. 1, Site 41 has been environmentally illegitimate since the beginning. Since the beginning. When it was proposed 20 years ago, the one independent body that was to judge it, the Environmental Review Board at the time, rejected it. And it was only put back on the public agenda through the back door of politics at Queen's Park. And not for environmental reasons, I can assure you. So we spent 20 years, or they spent 20 years, trying to drive a square peg into a round hole, to try and make it fit. But the fact of the matter is, they cannot easily do so, or they would explain what is the science behind what they're doing. They would give us the information. And it seems to me that although some people say today that if it was done today and proposed today, it wouldn't happen. It's interesting to note, my first point, 20 years ago, when the standards were even lower, it was rejected by the environmental body at that time. That's why it's been illegitimate. Second reason, we have spent somewhere between 20 and 25 years now trying to re-understand what our relationship is with nature. What's our relationship with the environment? We had to finally get it into our heads that the oldest understanding of humans in the world has been that everything is connected to everything else. And therefore, we are responsible for the consequences of our actions. And the idea that you can move in, use up, and throw away and move on is no longer acceptable in our society. That is why we have spent the last number of years understanding what we need to do with respect to waste management and new ways of dealing with it that people have talked about. Understanding the importance of clean water and how we should make sure we preserve it for future generations. Understanding what our new relationship is with nature. That is why all those reasons, all those things we've been doing are the reasons why, and this is a very important second point, that Gord Miller, the one independent body, the one independent voice in this whole thing, he is the Environment Commissioner of the province of Ontario, is calling for a moratorium and a review the same as we are. He should be listened to by his own colleagues at Queen's Park. The third reason, and make sure people understand this, there's still a choice to be made. Because some people say, well, we spent 20 years, we have spent millions of dollars, we have no choice, we've got to proceed. That is a moral, indefensible position to take. The fact of the matter is, you learned it at your parents' knee, and that is, it is never, ever too late to do the right thing. So keep up.
Thank you very much, David. An organization, there have been many organizations doing a lot of hard work over dump site 41, a lot of individuals as well. One of the organizations that's been working very hard, of course, we all know, the Council of Canadians. And here to say a few words is Mira Karunananthan, the water campaigner for the Council of Canadians. Mira?
Thank you. I would like to start by recognizing that this is Mississauga land and would like to thank the Mississauga First Nation for having us on their land today. As Carlene mentioned in the beginning, Maud Barlow, who has been working on this issue with you all, it was very sad not to be able to be here today. And she asked me to remind you that we are going to win this battle. And it's hard looking around in this room. It's hard when you feel this energy to think that anything but victory is possible. And I also would like to share with you, I had dinner with Maud's husband, Andrew, recently, and he said something that I thought was really, really important. He said, you can't always tell what a victory is until you look back on it many years later. And I think we have won. I think you, as a community of activists, have won so many battles in this struggle. You have taken this issue that was perceived many years ago as a small local issue and made it a national issue. You have drawn provincial attention to it, national attention, and even international attention. As you know, Ralph Nader recently visited the site and denounced the dumpsite. And if Maud were here, she would tell you, as she has on many occasions before, that you are all heroes for the tireless work that you've done on Site 41, and that you are an inspiration to communities across the country who are facing similar struggles. Now, you know when there's a proposal to build a landfill on top of what is the purest tested water in the world, that we live in a society where our values are upside down. Well, perhaps not our values, but some of our decision makers have their values reversed. So I'd like to propose what I think the values that we as activists working on Site 41 would like to propose to our decision makers, not just in Simcoe County, but provincially and federally. One, I think it's one of the most important values or principles is that water is a human right. And that means that access to safe, clean drinking water must be protected, not just for all of us here today, but for future generations as well. We know that in Canada we are dealing with a freshwater crisis, something that many people didn't believe a few years ago. We're beginning to, even the most conservative sources like Environment Canada are beginning to recognize that we are running out of water or running out of clean, safe drinking water in many parts of Canada. A third of our municipalities have faced water shortages, and we don't actually even know what our groundwater sources are. We haven't mapped them adequately in Ontario or in Canada. There was a recent Canadian Press article. The Canadian Press obtained a report through an access to information process showing that we actually, the federal government's promised to look at groundwater sources, they wouldn't actually have the information ready for at least 22 years. So we don't know what our groundwater sources are, and yet we're allowing for this landfill to be built that will very likely contaminate groundwater sources. The second principle is that communities must be empowered and recognized as stewards of the water, and that means recognizing local knowledge. We have a situation in Site 41 where observations made by farmers and First Nations communities who are very close to the land are being ignored And we're sticking to the information that was obtained through a computer-generated program. So we value this mathematical model over the knowledge of community members who are part of that land and who drink that water, who farm that land. And that to me is a reversal of our values. And so it's very important that communities be empowered or recognized as stewards of the environment. Instead, we've actually criminalized our environmental stewards in Simcoe County. The third value is that, or the third principle is that First Nations rights must be recognized. And it's very important that our governments understand that to consult First Nations communities is not to hold a town hall meeting where you've invited a few people to come and listen to you or speak to you. We need nation-to-nation consultation with First Nations communities. We wouldn't touch water, Canada wouldn't touch water that affects the U.S. without consulting the U.S. The sovereignty of First Nations governments needs to be recognized. And this means not just on land that is unceded First Nations territory, but where natural resources are affected that will affect the ability of First Nations communities to live on their land in a safe and healthy manner. First Nations and Indigenous communities must be consulted, and their decisions must be honored. The fourth principle is a very important principle in environmental stewardship. It's the precautionary principle, and that means that if there's even a shadow of a doubt that the environment might be harmed, the onus is on those who seek to harm the environment to prove that what they're proposing to do is safe. It is not on those of us trying to protect the environment to have to prove that. The Simcoe County has, as we know, increasingly has based this decision on very flimsy evidence. They've turned to us to look for alternatives. They've asked us what else can be done. It's not up to us to find those alternatives. It's up to them to find those alternatives, because building a dump site on the Alston Aquifer just isn't an option. The fifth principle is that water is a public trust. It's important that our decision makers recognize that their duty is to protect what is a public resource that is collectively owned by all of us. It is not in their power. They do not have the authority to make decisions that will harm our water sources. That their primary function as governments within the public trust doctrine, within this doctrine that recognizes water as a public trust, which is part of our common law here in Canada, their primary function is to manage that water, to take care of that water on our behalf. And that is not what's happening. That is not what's happening in Simcoe County or in Ontario through this decision. Now, I think this is part. What's happening in Simcoe County is part of a larger battle, and your work has sent a message, I think, very broadly. It's also sent a message of hope. After decades of struggle, we are, I think, very close to a victory. There will be a vote on August 25th at Simcoe County. We need to work very hard to remind decision makers who will be voting on August 25th that they need to make the right decision. It was a mistake there's no doubt it was a mistake to approve a landfill on Site 41, and we need to put the pressure on to ensure that they make the right decision. And I think that many of them have heard your voices, have heard the protests, have heard the letters you've written in, and I think some of them, at least some of them, are looking for an opportunity to change their minds. At least I hope so. I also hear that they are planning what they call an information session on the 25th, so they'll be there armed to provide, their justification for approving the site. But it'll be an opportunity for all of you to go out and ask tough questions. So I hope you'll be there on the 25th. I hope you'll participate in that meeting and ask tough questions. We also have a petition that Carlene is holding up right now. Hopefully, everybody should have a copy. Please sign that petition and leave it at the Council of Canadians table in the back, if you haven't already. Just looking at Carlene to see if there's anything else I need to remind people of before we toast. There is also an action alert online on the Council of Canadians website at www.canadians.org. So please go to our website to sign that petition if you haven't already. I think over 800 people have already signed that petition. There's also the ongoing petition on stopdumpsite41.ca, and I think thousands of people have signed. And there's a Facebook group. So if you're not part of the Facebook group, if you haven't already signed the petitions, please do so. We need this is the final crunch, hopefully, and we need as much pressure to be put on our decision makers as possible. We'll also next week be sending. We've already written the Ministry of the Environment. We'll be sending another letter to the Premier next week, and we need to keep reminding the Ontario government that they need to stand up for what's right. Now, I'd like to sort of end on a positive note by, if you still have your water from Elmdale, by raising our glasses to toast and celebrate the water of the Alliston Aquifer.
Cheers. Cheers.
Who will defend the water? Who will stop dumpsite 41? We will. Who will defend the water? We will. Well, I know two people in the audience who've been working very hard to defend the water and stop dumpsite 41. Keith and Ina Woods. Some people, they've been called mischief makers, but to us in this room, they are heroes. They are two of the 10 people who've made such large personal sacrifices for this battle who were arrested recently, and they are also two of hundreds of activists who've been working very hard to prevent the site from being constructed, the dump site from being constructed, and I'd like to invite them to come share a few words with us.
Anybody left who has a glass, I think we should be raising our glass to Mr. and Mrs. Don't you think?
Good evening. I'm Keith Wood from East Lane and Tiny, just a couple kilometers from the lake, the landfill. And this is my wife, Diane, that makes all the good tarts. Every morning when I get up, I never know what's going to happen in my day. Being a farmer, you're really not too sure what is going to happen, but something always does. This particular day, Ina was working in the kitchen and I was out hoeing the garden. And Ina comes in and she says, Keith, you got to quit hoeing. We got to go down to the site right now because they closed the gates and the construction guys have cut a hole through the fence on Dawson Road. We got to go right now. So about 15 minutes we were down there. And Danny says, you better sit right here with me because we're short-handed. So this is the way we got involved with it. I never thought I was going to become an activist or a pain in the butt. I think maybe I was a pain in the butt, that's why the church didn't have that down in the law books. But, you know, I really enjoyed working with these people. Like, I've met friends that I just didn't know there was such good friends out there. We sat on them front lines day after day for 4 weeks. And somehow I guess they got tired of me. They had the camera on me all the time. I was a pretty good storyteller. Maybe I was telling too many stories. But, you know, I was talking to a lady calling me from the United States the other day. Never heard tell of her before, but she seemed to know all about me somehow. She says, the devil likes liars and crooks, and that makes the rest of you people angels. Now, I could tell you stories for the rest of the night, but I have a few notes here that I'm going to read. I can still see enough to read. I guess of all the names they've called me this last week, people know me as an honest, thoughtful, reliable person. My family has always lived in Simcoe County. Working as farmers, we have a great respect for water, and it was needed to grow crops and healthy animals. My mother's parents farmed in Tiny Township, very close to dumpsite 41. They enjoyed having a flow on their property. The water was close enough to the surface that it would flow through a pipe driven into the ground. When I retired from farming in Tay Township, I moved to the property in Tiny Township, approximately 2 kilometers from the potential dump site. We have a well that gives us clean water, free, for my entire life. I have used water which comes from the Ellison Aquifer that is below the dump site. The aquifer extends from Georgian Bay to Lake Simcoe and beyond. Many people have been fighting the building of Site 41 for over 25 years. 5 of my grandchildren live in the area. I want to do all I can to preserve this clean water for them and their children. As a Canadian, we have always been told that we can enjoy freedom of speech and the right to protest everything we deem is wrong. There are only ways to handle garbage these days that you just don't dump it in the ground. The European countries have been using different methods for years. We can learn from them. Simcoe County, led by the warden, refuses to consider any other method. We cannot understand this reasoning. The county does not help us when they refuse to release the information to the Community Monitoring Committee. I am afraid the water of the Ellison Aquifer will become polluted if a dump is built on that site. Many of the Simcoe County dumps now are failing and sending leachate into the surrounding water systems. In County Township, the Posey dump is doing this thing. Why should the dump placed on Site 41 be any different? I feel the system has failed me. I'm waiting to hear the truth. It is our responsibility to ensure that the future generations have clean water to drink. Thank you very much.
Because of all your enthusiasm, I feel like I should say a few words also. We really don't feel like heroes, but it's very kind of you to acknowledge that maybe we did something a little bit rash. In sitting in front of gates, underneath just a tent, doing a little knitting, and doing a little talking, and just trying to keep from getting a sunburn. We never ever had to say to anyone, no, you cannot go into this dump site. I suppose that was our good fortune. And I was beginning to feel that I should maybe stand back a little bit and let younger people do this thing that I was doing. But instead of them coming to the site to find me where I wouldn't have been, they phoned our home and said, you are to get in here immediately, within an hour and a half. And it doesn't give you very much time to think about what your responses are going to be. So thankfully, the people at the dump site said, you don't have to go in right now, just wait a little while, we'll get things organized. And they had our injunction postponed for a day. And in that time, we were able to get a bit of a rally together. And we had a convoy of over 100 cars behind us. And so if I can smile, it's because I know that I have a lot of people behind me. And we are to go into the OPP office in Midland on the 7th of October and be fingerprinted. And then we are to go into court with the other ones that have been in injunction to stand trial. And I don't know what's going to happen that day. It's a new thing for me. We're hopefully thinking that they might just throw it out.
Yeah.
But, I've always believed that right shall prevail and wrong shall fail. And so that is the dream world I'm in right now. So thank you so much for your support.
The other day, looking for how mischief cases are dealt with in court. It's a minor offense under the criminal code, but the average number of appearances in court for those charged with mischief in Barrie 7.2. That means, on average, 7 different appearances in court before this thing is finally resolved, unless the Crown were to drop the charges in the first instance. But that's what they face. It's no simple thing. On a happier note, I should remind everyone of the Elmdale Water Festival. That happens next weekend, August 22nd, a festival of water in Elmdale. Everyone should make sure they go. Ask all of your friends to go. That will be the last public function before the August 25th meeting of County Council. So I think a good turnout at the Elmdale Water Festival would certainly help keep this uppermost in the minds of politicians. We were talking about how far and wide the story has spread of dumpsite 41. I'm reminded that this story appeared in Germany on television broadcasts, and 2 days ago, Russian broadcasts were also carrying stories about the fight. So when the warden of Simcoe County says, oh, it's just one of those little NIMBY issues, I can just imagine it making your socks roll up and down. Our last speaker for the evening is a guy who knows a thing or two about dump sites and how to knock them off the track, get rid of them, fight them. He's Charlie Angus. He's the NDP member for Timmins James Bay, and he led the attack group that led to the ultimately the Adams Mine Act, which forever sidelined that particular dump site. And he's here to give us some tips, I hope, on dump site 41. Charlie?
Well, it's a hot night. It's a beautiful night, but I couldn't be anywhere else in the country right now than here. And I got a call yesterday morning from a woman who lives in the little town of Latchford, and she's probably about the same age as Mrs. Woods, and she said, Mr. Angus, I don't want to bother you at home, but have you heard what they're doing to those people in Tiny Township? And I said, oh, I have heard, ma'am. She said, we fought those buggers for 14 years, and we can't let them win somewhere else. We've got to send our people down. So I said, well, we're talking with them. I'd like to thank the students of UAT who are here tonight. I'd like to thank the people of the City of Toronto who are getting organized. And I'd like to thank the elected officials from your region who came down with you. Because there's nothing more we like to kick about than the Toronto Maple Leafs and the weather and politicians. But at the end of the day, the politician is your servant. He's the person or she's the person that you have to trust to make the decision that affects the future of your region, your province, and your country. And you have elected officials who chose not to come down here tonight. Elected officials who've had your elders arrested and taken in as criminals.
Shame.
That is something that we have to focus on. So tonight I've heard a lot of wonderful stories, I've heard a lot of wonderful ideas. You people are so idealistic, but I'm going to say something to you. It's the 11th hour. This is not the time for you to have to figure out how to solve the world's problems. This is about the time when you need to make the process accountable to you. Because at the end of the day, and I have to say it, I'll say it quite bluntly, I didn't come down from Timmins James Bay to fight because you people don't want to dump. I came down because you people have been abused by the process. And the process has to be accountable to you. And nothing will change this process when you make it accountable. You know, I remember the moment I decided that I was going to get into politics. It was 3 o'clock in the morning on Thanksgiving weekend in the year of 2000, and I was standing on a makeshift blockade watching the white lights of the OPP cruisers lining up on the road because we knew they were coming to arrest us. And I was standing with a German-Canadian farmer, and I was standing with a young First Nation guy from Temiskaming First Nation, and the farmer said to me, "I never thought I'd be an outcast on my land." And I thought, how could it be that common citizens who trust in a process find themselves at a point when they're facing lawsuits, when they're facing threats, when they're facing all kinds of legal intimidation to shut them down because the process abused them? That has to change. So I'm going to suggest tonight you have to start making your fight. I know you guys are doing a great job in Simcoe County, and it's not my job to tell you how to do it there. That's your turf. You know how to do it. But the issue here is about the Ministry of Environment and their failure to protect you and to protect your water. I'm going to just give you a little bit of a background on what we learned about Adams Mine, because most people, most community groups don't learn the lesson till it's too late. If you trust in the process, if you trust in the elected officials who put the people in the Ministry of Environment, you will be living with a dump site. That is what the process is there for. You know, the Adams Mine was massive pits. Like people think of a mine, they think of a deep shaft. It wasn't. These were huge pits sitting on the height of land above the Ritchie-Nahuis farm district. These pits had been so badly blasted, fractured rock, and every day in South Pit of Adams Mine, 350 million liters of groundwater flowed through those pits. Not flowed in, they flowed through them. We were on the watershed. If you're driving on Highway 11, you'll see on the north side it says, from here all the waters flow to the Arctic, from here all the waters flow down to the St. Lawrence. It was right at the watershed. And that water flowed through the Adams Mine pits and it flowed into the Farm Belt through fractured rock. Now, I'm not going to give you a long geology lesson, but it's important to just to get a picture of what happened here. You try and track water in fractured rock. You ask any farmer in our region about figuring out where that well should go. It's not a very easy process. What they did with Adams Mine was they took about 6 or 8, 10 drill holes over a large area. I mean, these were massive, massive pits. And they said, geez, we got lots of water. That means all the water will flow into the pits. Now, normally, water's not a good thing to have in garbage. They said, no, this is great. What we'll do is we'll use the water to wash the garbage. So for 20 years of Toronto's garbage, we will wash and run pumps for 1,000 years. Well, when you're like average citizen and you go to one of these meetings, you think, well, that's got to be the craziest idea I've ever heard. And then you go home because you tell your wife, you say, imagine this. Not only are they going to run the pumps for 1,000 years, but they figured out what it's going to cost per hour 850 years from now. They showed us on a chart. Now imagine 850 years ago, that would be like the time of Charlemagne. Okay, so Charlemagne and the Holy Roman Empire figuring what it's going to cost to pay a guy to dig a hole 850 years in the future. Well, it'll cost us 6 beads, 7 bones, and a couple of fur skins. I mean, well, we thought, well, you know, you're like, you've got lives, we had lives, we didn't take this seriously. We thought, you know, when this gets to the Ministry of Environment, they're going to laugh this out of the room. Well, they didn't. And when our farmers and our miners were getting up and saying, these pits are so badly blasted, you could never contain water in here. Well, what about the liner? Well, you don't need a liner. It's even better without a liner. And we said the Ministry of Environment will stand up for us. Oh, no, they didn't. What happened in the process, they asked us to come out to the meetings and say what the problems were. And we stood up, average people like you and me. We didn't have experts. They had the experts. They had the consultants, the people who won't give you the data. And the consultants all snickered and shook their heads and said, oh, you poor people. And they couldn't answer a single question that we raised. And we raised questions again and again and again about why the maps that they were showing weren't the accurate maps from the mine. Why the groundwater flows they couldn't predict. You know what they ended up doing? This is the process for you. When it came to the environmental assessment, all those issues were scoped out. That wasn't going to be looked at. So it was a pretty pithy project at the end. What they ended up, the only thing in the environmental assessment for the Adams Mine, which was going to be the biggest landfill in North America, was a 2-dimensional drawing provided by a consultant. It was a computer model. Just like the computer model they won't show you. And they went to the EA and they said, look at this computer model. Does it work? And even then it didn't work. Because the EA, they said, you have to drill deep. You don't even know what's below. You can't tell. So they drilled. And what they found in those drill holes was that this computer model was a failure. And you know what? The Ministry of Environment rubber stamped it. And it went ahead. And the Ministry of Environment told us we didn't know what we were talking about. And Dr. Larry Jensen, who was the chief geologist at Kirkland Lake for 35 years, wrote to the Ministry of Environment. And he said, this is the most bogus science I've ever seen. He said, you are dealing with potential environmental catastrophe for the entire Ottawa River watershed. And he wrote to the Mayor of Toronto, he wrote to councillors, he wrote to every bureaucrat. And you know what they wrote back? They said, well, this has been studied to death. Which is what they've told you in Tiny Township. Which is that if they've taken your community and thrown your community against the wall for 20-some years, well, shouldn't that be good enough to prove that it's a good site? They tried to blow out Dr. Jensen. Then we brought in Dr. Ken Howard, who is the lead hydrogeologist on the Walkerton Inquiry. And Howard looked at this. And Howard wasn't against the landfill. He said, if it works, it works. He looked at the modeling and he said, there was absolutely no scientific basis. These were completely without merit. And the Ministry of Environment tried to ignore him. These are the officials whose job it is to protect the water. It's not your job to protect the water. You should look after the water. You should not go dumping things in the water. But you have elected officials. You have a ministry. And where are they? They're letting you sit and swelter in this room on a hot summer night talking about how to make the world better. Well, I'm going to suggest to you tonight, we are going to win this fight in Site 41. We are going to win it. And we won that fight on the Adams mine because we learned a few lessons. We learned that every time we won and then went back to our lives, they reorganized and changed the rules, and they came back like a more virulent form of influenza. And we decided one day that we weren't going to go back to our lives. We were going to take the fight to them. Because you know what? They had disrupted our lives for 10, 12, 13, 14 years. We were going to disrupt theirs. And our people got organized. And we had a simple philosophy. Each one reach one, each one teach one. For everyone in this room, you go and get someone else. And you just explain to them about Tiny Township. You explain to them. You don't have to sell them. They're going to understand. And you get them to the meeting. And you start to focus where that attention is going to go. And an outrageous act that they will not give you that modeling. If that modeling is so good, then bring it out. And bring it out for an independent peer review. Simple story. So I would say at this point, we are going to win this fight. You people have done such a phenomenal job as it is right now. And you will change Ontario politics and you will change Ontario rules by establishing, and this was the only thing we didn't do in Adams Mine. We won that fight, but we thought the fight was over. But we realized afterwards that when a process is in place where your Ministry of Environment, the people hired to protect you, will rubber stamp whatever sits on their desk, then the fight's not over. That's why I'm here tonight. That's your fight. We will fix all the problems of the world after that fight is over. But the big fight to win is to make that Ministry of Environment accountable for you to protect the watershed, because as has been said tonight, this isn't about you. This is about your children, this is about your grandchildren, and this is about your obligation to pass this world on to them in a way that hasn't been contaminated and ruined. And so I want to say, make wish to the people who stood up. Thank you. I don't have to tell you what that job is, but this is going to be the fight that we take it to the next level. You've got people who are putting their lives on the line. They're putting their families on the line, and I know you people are there with them. So let's take the fight to them. Let's take the fight to the people who put you in this position, and let's take this fight to the bureaucrats and let's make them think twice before doing this to any other community in the province of Ontario. You guys are going to set the path, so thank you. I'm very proud of you.
All of the people on my list of speakers for this evening, what I would like to do before we leave this gathering and start preparing, if necessary, for rally number 5, I'd like to thank all the hardworking people at the Council of Canadians who've made this possible for us. And I think don't forget, I should say, the buckets out in the hallway. And as we leave this evening, how big a movement are we now? We're a big enough movement to have our own singers. The site 41 singers are going to drum and sing us out of the hall. So until we meet again, don't go quietly, all right?